Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're listening. It's a new week. I'm Danielle Heberling, and this is my co host, Alan Helton, and we're here to talk about you. In episode 6 of the Believe in Serverless podcast, we're going to cover everything that happened this last week. This is the week of August 19th to August 25th. So let's jump right in. So, quick mention of this podcast purpose. As a reminder, we do this podcast to help catch you up on what you might have missed in the community. We're going to cover some of the best conversations from our Discord, answer some pressing questions that went unanswered, and we're going to discuss the live streams and what we found interesting about them. So, before we start rolling, let's first thank our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Memento. Memento is an enterprise-ready serverless infrastructure platform with caching, event messaging, and storage services. Memento is a pay-as-you-go platform with instantly available cloud resources that elastically scale to meet even the most demanding workloads. Get started today for free by going to console.gomemento.com. Thank you so much to the Memento team for sponsoring this episode of the podcast, and even more so for your ongoing support of the Believe in Serverless community.
Yes, thank you. And for anyone that doesn't know, I actually work at Memento, and I have been on leave for about 12-ish weeks. So I just started back last week, and I come back to a completed integration with Memento and EventBridge, which is extremely exciting for me because EventBridge and Step Functions are my two favorite AWS services. So come back to being able to have Memento as a partner destination for EventBridge was super exciting to see. I think I made a video. Like that was the first thing I did when I got back was make a video about talking about how excited I was about it.
Get to see all the cool stuff they did while you're gone. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. So much to catch up on. Okay. So let's greet the new members. We had 8 new members this week. And this is my favorite. This is one of my favorite parts of the podcast where I try to pronounce the usernames and not the real names of these people. So welcome to Masum, CTC, Nitin Parab, Aditya Oberai, just a Twitter profile name, x.com/Dominic Frey, Nick the security dude, that's an easy one to read, Iron Fruit, and Derek Mirosky. Welcome. I'm excited to learn from all of you.
Very exciting. Yeah, I think I might know some of those people. So we're excited to have you in the community and really excited to meet the new folks that I don't know. Awesome. So let's get to community highlights for this week. So, one conversation that I found highly engaging was actually not even really directly serverless related. A user named Adam Dingman asked the group how we capture ideas that strike at random times, like the shower thought type of thing. And that was really interesting just to see other people's, how they handle that. How do you handle that, Alan?
Yeah, I think I was actually the first person to chime in on that question when he asked it. I use Evernote. I have Evernote on my phone and on my computer. And whenever I write something down on my phone, it, syncs to the cloud and I can see it once I sit down at my machine. I started off doing this with texting. I used to text myself these
Oh,
things,
well,
but that left me isolated on my phone and just thought, there's got to be a better way. Got to be a better way to do it. So Evernote's something I've been using for a while. My wife and I share an account, so we have shared notes in there. So that's the one that we ended up going with. But it seemed like that was generally the going consensus for everybody that was answering that question was more or less a cloud notes taking app. I think I was the only one that said Evernote, but we saw Notion, we saw Google Keep. What else did we see? We saw a bunch of things that were like
someone
basically.
even said like Kindle Scribe too.
Oh yeah, Andres said that.
Yeah, I think that was
He
Andres.
Yeah, I really like the Kindle Scribe that he has. He can write. handwritten notes, and that syncs up to the cloud, and he can see those in handwritten form.
Yeah, those are cool. I don't have the Amazon. It's Books Nova 3. It runs on Android. It's like a full Android OS. Similar to the Kindle Scribe though, except for not quite as proprietary, and really love it. Like just when I physically write notes, I remember a lot more, I think. So
I agree. I agree. It takes a little bit more effort to write something down, and the longer you can spend like focusing on a detail, the higher likelihood you're going to be remembering it.
yeah,
So
totally.
yeah, I think that was the gist, really. I mean, I saw what else did we see? We saw WhatsApp in there, which
Yeah, that one was interesting. I never thought about using it for that.
yeah, I mean, that's like the 2024 version of texting yourself
Yeah.
using WhatsApp, especially for non-Americans, right? We don't typically use that here in the United States. WhatsApp,
Yeah.
I use it pretty much exclusively to talk to my European friends. That's it.
And
Or if I'm like on I think it's American Airlines, so I'm flying in the air, they give you free texting through WhatsApp. So that's the only time I'll text Americans is when I'm flying and using WhatsApp on America.
yeah, totally. Yeah, but I guess maybe like the TLDR on that is like I know with me, like my creative process, like thoughts are really everywhere. So it's good to get stuff written down somewhere. So then later when I feel motivated to actually create, then I know what to look at for, what my past ideas were. So really love this conversation. Thank you for bringing it up, Adam.
And
Yeah.
so we had another pretty interesting topic of conversation. Now it was I can't really say it was a super everybody was participating flow, but it was really more or less Raphael Monkey. I'm sorry if I ruined that name, Raphael. Um, but he was like giving us updates on some OTEL work that he was doing. He basically posed an idea. I think him and James were going back and forth about the possibilities of it working. And then Raphael was just like going and building a proof of concept with an OTEL receiver and just giving us running updates of how it was working. Thought it was really cool to see. It was really neat to just follow along with that train of thought.
Yeah, I always like how I've interacted with Raphael quite a bit, like in person and online. And I think that's one thing that I really like about him is he's really into like, I wonder how this is. And then he just goes and builds something. And even if it is like, rough POC, it's really nice to physically see what he was conceptualizing. And I think this is going to be a big ad for the community.
Yeah, and I wasn't following too close. Really, I was following along more at a meta level where I was watching him give us status updates. So I don't know a lot of the detail about it, but I want to say this was him trying to like improve X-ray or something like that using OTEL. But the good news is, maybe you know more about it, but the good news is, uh, I did ask Raphael with puppy dog eyes, can you please give a talk to the community about this? And he said, sure. So I'm looking forward to that one whenever we get him on the schedule.
Yeah, I think this will be a super interesting talk once we get it on the books. So looking forward to it. And thanks for the conversation, Raphael. And maybe if we're nice enough to James, he can put the repo in the show notes. That might be interesting. Awesome. So the third conversation that I saw in the community was Samuel Locke had some conversation that he started regarding uh, DynamoDB versus relational databases. He works with Serverless Guru, so lots of consulting. I'm sure he's seen a lot of stuff, but he was saying, um, isn't it better in some cases to use a relational database versus a lot of the data replication that's required with DynamoDB and probably NoSQL in general? Because especially with DynamoDB, you're paying for that storage. I forget the exact specs, but it was something like 4 terabytes of data with replication sometimes could turn into 10 terabytes. I think maybe he said that. But yeah,
Now,
super interesting convo.
when I actually missed that one completely, I have opinions just on this elevator pitch for it. When he says data replication, do you mean like denormalizing data in different records for different access patterns. Is that what he was talking about?
Yeah, that was what he was referring to.
That was probably the hardest concept for me when I was beginning to learn NoSQL. I think I was 8-ish years into my professional career when I started making that shift. And it was full SQL the whole time, like Microsoft SQL Server kind of SQL. And we just kept asking at like AWS SAs, it's like, so how do you do a join? Like if I want this data, do I how do you how do you join? Like I kept trying to ask the question
Yeah.
and then I just kept coming back to how do you join? And understanding really that you don't and you denormalize that data for different access patterns it took me a while to understand that conceptually. It was interesting. But of course that's a trade-off
Yeah.
when we're talking about NoSQL versus relational.
Yeah, I think it depends on your data and, just what each team values. Cause like I know my company, we use healthcare and well, we are healthcare and like healthcare data is super messy and all over the place. So we're all in on Postgres for that reason. Cause not only do you have a lot of different access patterns you don't know about, you also have a lot of data shapes that you think you know, but then you don't.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I can't even. I usually find services or tools that I really like and I latch on and I never let them go. Like I did that with Postman. Like people generally associate me with Postman. I don't work for them. I never have, but I really like the app, and I talk about it a lot. I recently have started to latch on to Neon, which is that serverless Postgres service.
Oh yeah, that does look
Uh,
super cool.
been really enjoying it, and it's actually made me start coming back more regularly from the NoSQL world back into a relational world, because I actually think that Neon is serverless. Like Andres and I did an assessment on that in one of our coding live streams where we were trying to see is Neon serverless, and yeah, it is. It is, which is super cool. So I'm kind of getting back into that and working through the trade-offs and reminding myself, it's like, what do you get here? What do you get over there instead?
Yeah, pros and cons for sure. Yeah, I watched that. I think it was James and Mahmood talking about that. Sold me on it, so it's very much on my short list of things to try. Like it seemed very developer centric with like the different branches and all that. So that's why I was like, oh, this does seem super cool.
Yes. Yeah. I like the fact that you can branch the data in your database in Neon like you could a Git repository. So like you could branch the data in a CI/CD pipeline, run some automation tests, evaluate that everything still works, and then just kill the fork, kill the branch,
Yeah,
and you didn't update. You could branch off production data and use that. Uh, Probably not the best idea, but you mean you could in theory, which would be super super useful.
definitely. Cool. Let's move on to unanswered questions, which is actually a little misleading because this was another pretty good week with most of the questions were fully answered. So I was just going to bring up two that were asked that I think we probably still have some more discussion surrounding them. The first one that I saw was Tico. He brought up a topic related to he had a zip based Lambda. Um, Moving it to a Docker Lambda, and he found that it causes CloudFormation not be able to deploy. Um, and he was kind of asking for help, like if he was missing something or if that's just how CloudFormation works. Um, Personally, I've never run into this. I have used Docker Lambdas, but it's usually because I started with them, not because I was moving to them. Have you run into
Yeah.
this at all, Alan?
I mean, I can't honestly say that I've used a container function before. So no, I haven't. Just talk like listen, hearing that problem on the surface sounds to me like a bug. And AWS is big, but they're not bug free. We all know that. So it could be. What was the resolution? That was an answered question? Did he figure it out?
Actually, I think that one was fully unanswered. Ron came in and shared a blog post, and then Tika followed up saying, like, yeah, but like, how did you get around this error? And yeah, actually, I think this one might actually be unanswered. I think the answer might be that it's a cloud formation issue though, because I feel like someone in our community would have been like, "Oh yeah, I ran into this. Like, here's how I got around it."
Yeah. This might end
But
up having to be a multi-step deployment to for him to get around. Create the Lambda function separately as a new function. Don't try to update the existing one. Get that up into the sky, then point your API gateway endpoint or whatever he's using for API
yeah,
routing to that one. And then after that traffic is migrated over, then go and update that last one or get rid of the original Lambda function.
yeah, yeah. I think that's what he said he was doing. But yeah, I was like, ideally, you just want to swap it out, then just you're good to go. So,
In
but
theory, you'd think that would work. I mean, I totally agree with that.
yeah. Anyway, let's go on to another one. This one was more conversational rather than a question. But Adam Dingman was asking if we thought that the buzz around Terraform was dying, especially with the more recent IBM acquisition of HashiCorp and OpenTofu and things like that. I thought that was an interesting conversation. Personally, my company is all in on CDK, so we've never talked about Terraform, but that doesn't mean it's not a good tool for some folks. So I'm probably not qualified to answer this one, but
Yeah, I'm not either. And I was just recently, within the past couple of weeks, considering starting to get into Terraform for the first time. Momento uses CDK for actually building Momento, but I, as an app builder that does all the things on the side, I use SAM. I use the serverless
mm,
application model. So I don't use CDK at all. I'm not a big fan. But that's a topic. That's a topic for another day. But like when I was thinking about Terraform, it AWS seems to be really embracing it. I saw a lot of work that Eric Johnson was doing in the past year with Terraform specifically, but I was looking at it because I was trying to figure out how would I create workloads in Cloudflare instead of AWS.
oh yeah,
Obviously, I'm not going to be using SAM to deploy anything into Cloudflare or CDK, but there is support for Terraform, which if you're trying to start venturing into multi-cloud, well, maybe these IAC frameworks that are multi-cloud have a little bit more value in them. And I'm not seeing as much pushback on the idea of multi-cloud as I have in the, recent years. So I'm wondering, is it gonna be more adopted? And maybe not necessarily Terraform, maybe OpenTofu, maybe one of the other, options out there. There's other vendors too, like Pulumi is another option for that. And then there's also, infrastructure from code vendors out there. I know Clotho does a really good job with this as well. So it's an interesting thought because I feel
yeah.
like the tech community is opening up more to other things.
Yeah, I've loved my limited time using Terraform, just because I've only really used it with the AWS provider, but under the hood, they use AWS SDK. So it was way faster than CloudFormation, which I loved. And also Terraform Plan. I really liked that. You just type that and then you see, what's going to change in plain text. And like that was kind of nice for just like a sanity check of, oh yeah, this is what's going to change. I really enjoyed that too. So awesome. So I guess our answer is stay tuned. I do think it
Yeah.
might be key with like multi-cloud and people trying out, other providers such as Cloudflare. So
And I'll quickly weigh in on the debate that's super polarizing. I don't think you should build from the ground up with the expectation that you will move cloud providers. I think that adds unnecessary complexity early on, and the writing will probably be on the walls for a long time in the event that you do actually need to change providers. They're not going to pull the rug out from under you if you're using one of the like AWS. So I say use the things that are best optimized for where you are.
awesome. Okay. Let's move on to live stream key points. This first one was a talk by Cliff Crossland from scanner.dev. And he did a lot of work with benchmarking serverless speed with different runtimes. So let's watch the clip.
We were able to get to the point where you could read a gigabyte of this JSON data in 2 seconds, which is really cool. And not much variance. They all were pretty consistent. And then this is interesting. It's just to look at cold start time. So at first, Java was really bad because we weren't using snap start. We were just trying to launch it from a cold start. And I think everyone kind of understands this with Java. This is kind of a battle that people have with Lambda functions. The cold start time for Java without snap start enabled is really slow. It can be like 500 to 600 milliseconds. And it gets maybe a little bit better as you allocate a lot of memory for it.
I really like Scanner and I like everything that they do. I think Cliff is a super smart guy. And I've actually been consulting with Scanner for a couple of years. Not necessarily on here's the best thing for you, but for uh, basically what Cliff is talking about in this talk. We've been consulting, I think, since 2022. And he is the person to talk to when we're talking about benchmarking different runtimes. Just like a quick, super fast primer on Scanner, he cares a lot about what is the fastest because what Scanner does is it scans terabytes of data in milliseconds, worst case scenario in seconds to look for security threats. And you need to know as quickly as possible if there is a security event. You need to be able to audit things in the case that there is an event. So he used Lambda in a very innovative way to basically index, parse, and scan just hundreds of thousands, millions of records of logs, just in a super, super fast way. So it's really cool to see Cliff talk about the actual performance benchmarks that they did to build Scanner.
Yeah, and like it went even further than just like, I use this runtime, I use that runtime. He even found that when they used a different JSON parsing library, that sometimes it would be faster or slower. So I thought that was super interesting as well. Just like all the little details and knobs that like him and his team had to turn to test various things. It seemed, yeah, super interesting. Very good talk. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend watching the rewatch.
Yes, absolutely. And just another teaser for that session before we move on to the next one. Cliff goes and talks about a specific case study or example that he did where he ran a query in Athena, in Amazon Athena, against like a 24 terabyte data set. And it took an hour and a half to run the query and then crashed. It didn't even complete. But he ran that same query in Scanner and it took 2 seconds. So it's really neat to see what they've built and how they've optimized their performance by getting really deep into the runtimes and the tooling that they're using to actually build that software.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's move on to our next clip. I think the title of this talk was Harder, Better, Faster with Rust with Luciano Mamino. So let's watch that clip.
I think the tooling and the tutorials that you can find online are already there and everyone can do an hello world in like 15 minutes. Yeah. Then I think the problem is next. Say, okay, now I want to build my next startup entirely in serverless and Rust. I think there is still a vast land that people need to explore and figure out exactly, as you said, what are the best practices, what are the common problems, what is a structure that is generally good enough for the majority of projects, and it can be a starting point. This is what we are trying to explore with this book, but hopefully we'll be able to achieve a good result and provide good material to be.
So the book that he references is a book he is writing with James on building with Rust, I believe. I don't know what the title is called. Do you know what the title of the book is called?
I think it was something with Lambda and Rust.
Sounds right. I believe that.
Correct us if we're wrong.
Yeah. Knowing those two guys, I would believe that wholeheartedly that that's what that book is about. But with this clip, I almost feel like we should just talk about like the state of Rust in general, especially when we're talking about building your next application, which is kind of what Luciano was talking about. And there's a lot of hype with Rust, but hype doesn't always mean maturity. And, one of the risks that you run with dropping everything and going to Rust is more or less that lack of deep community support and the years of experience of people saying, oh yeah, I saw that. Here's how you fix that. Or here's what we did when we saw this situation and how we pivoted. It's new. It's fast. You can't argue that it's incredibly fast, but as Luciano points out, there's a lot of hello worlds out there right now. There's not a whole lot of here is how you build this piece of an enterprise grade application in Rust.
Yeah, it almost kind of mirrors to a degree, like the early days of serverless. Just like there were so many, like here's how to do a hello world in a Lambda, but like it was hard for me to find, how do I compose this together as part of a full-on app, that I might use at my day job. And I think Rust might be similar. But yeah, definitely lots of chatter about it, which I think is positive. But also sometimes I do wonder how much of the hype measures up to actual usage. And I don't mean that in like a disparaging way, just in if more people are talking about it, you could kind of have that thought in your head of like, oh, all these people are talking about it, so they must be using it. And then personally, I don't think that's the case at all, but I could be wrong.
Yep. I think the really strong practitioners of it aren't talking about it enough. A lot of the champions that you're seeing advocating for it out in the field right now that are creating the resources necessary aren't using it under at scale production workloads. And the ones that are, they just don't have the microphone turned on, which is fine. We're still kind of early. Like I can tell you for sure, Memento, the majority of the entire service is written in Rust, and that's a full-on or enterprise grade service right there. It works in production. It's powering millions of requests a second on their services, and it's in Rust. We just don't have the microphone turned on for exactly how it was built.
Yeah, really excited to see the future of all of this because, yeah, I don't doubt that Rust is probably a big part of our future, especially in serverless, just in terms of, wanting speed and stuff at scale. Yeah, really excited about it. But yeah, for now, I kind of feel like it might be a little more hype than actual usage. And really excited to see stuff like that book, because that's a problem that they're looking to solve with writing that book. So the more content we get like that, I think the more we can kind of push forward into the future and use Rust for actual production grade beyond Hello World apps. So I'm really excited to see that.
Now, let me ask you one more opinion. You don't have to camp on it for very long. What's your thought on picking up and learning Rust right now when you see other innovations off to the side? Let's take LLRT from Amazon that are making things like JavaScript run almost as fast as Rust. Do you think that it's worth the time to completely relearn and do that, or is it worth waiting for these other innovations that are going to make what we're using now faster?
It depends on what you're looking to accomplish. And also like the interest and appetite for learning different things with your team. Cause like I know if you have a team of more, kind of new to tech folks that are in the JavaScript world, you may want to lean more towards, LLRT because it's less overhead for them. But at the same time, if you've got a lot of people that are super motivated to want to learn Rust, I would say go with that. So it's my non-answer, but it's an answer.
Yeah. I should have expected it depends. That is totally an it depends question.
Yeah. And also too, like just how much scale your company has. Cause like, I'll tell you right now, like at my current day job, it's an internal tool that's only used by, a few locations at various medical centers. So currently we don't have a lot of usage. So I don't think for us, it would be very practical to use Rust. But in the future, as we grow, maybe. So
Well, you know what? Based on what you just said, let me veer us from our regular programming here because I saw a very interesting question on Twitter this weekend. That wasn't actually a question; it was from DHH, who I forget his name. It's the guy that invented Ruby,
yeah,
and he always makes the
yeah.
yes. And he always makes these incredibly robust claims that I feel like he's just trolling in a lot of situations. But, regardless of whether or not that's what he's actually doing, he made the statement that if your SaaS application is not bringing in more than $1 million of annual recurring revenue, you don't need more than one server. Building something that is fully distributed and takes advantage of the distributed compute and storage that something like Amazon provides is unnecessary complexity. And he says you just need one box that's super, super beefy that you can run your compute, your jobs, and your storage on. And I read that and I was like, well, that's quite the claim. But what are your opinions on that, Danielle?
I think that's assuming that a lot of people have, you know, high level of experience with like Linux OS and sysops, things like that. I mean, I could see his point just because, it is a lot simpler in regards to its more traditional. So if you have a lot of folks on your team that, know a lot about that stuff, it could be simpler and more straightforward. I could tell you for my day job, the reason why we've went with serverless is because we know we are going to scale and get bigger. And also too, we have a lot of like overnight batch jobs for syncing a lot of data, and we don't need that to be running constantly. And serverless gives us the flexibility for, better pricing and things like that. So I think I would personally lightly disagree with him in certain situations, but he does seem like a smart guy and all that. So I'm not going to 100% discount because I think you can always learn something from someone, especially if they have drastically different opinions than yourself. So,
Oh yeah, makes you think about things a different way.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
love about that. So,
Yes. Okay, let's bring it back to what we're what we're here to talk about. I just thought it was a super interesting question.
yeah,
Uh,
that was
no,
loved.
this last clip that we have is from a live stream that Andres and I did on Friday, where we were trying Elastic Serverless out. We were trying to figure out if we could get it to go from I've never used this before to I can ingest data and search across that data in less than an hour. Now, I did say Elastic Serverless, not OpenSearch Serverless. This is actually a new in beta offering from Elastic. So let's watch that clip. Let's see the highlight here.
I think our biggest fear was that performance would be poor, and that especially for search, because people will abandon your page if search is slow. But it's probably figuring out the right balance of getting that to work. Also, how quickly the auto scaling will effectively kick in, because that's the other fear, is that you have a promotion online and then suddenly 500 people show up and just users cannot scale up quickly enough, and then they will abandon your site because they're frustrated. So we optimize more on that side. So we'll have few more configuration options yourself, and we'll automate some of that away in the background. So to make it a bit more serverless. The main engineering feat so far is the stateless nature of Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is storing its data on S3 directly and not on the instance anymore, which will then allow much more of that scaling up, scaling down, and like the durability, and also breaking up reads and writes. And you can scale the search part, for example, independently of the ingestion.
Man, so much cool information from there. Now, if you're listening and not watching this, that was not my voice, and that was not Andres's voice. I had actually asked Philip from Elastic to hop on our stream last Friday and just give us a little bit of the lay of the land. And so that was one of the employees from Elastic talking about some of the engineering considerations that they had to take on when building the serverless flavor of Elastic. So I just thought it was super interesting that, despite the, I don't want to say animosity, but the snafu between OpenSearch and Elasticsearch that happened in the past year, Elastic's, marching straight forward and using AWS services like S3 to build their serverless service. So I think is super cool.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. And I think too, it's like this could be a whole other hour-long conversation, but just the idea of like serverless, if it should be stateful or stateless. And I think services like Elasticsearch kind of cross that line because like you have to have state, but then how do you manage it if you want to have like a scale to zero service? So
Yeah. And yes, I'll do spoiler alert on this one. The Elasticsearch serverless offering that they have does have a minimum price per month, and it's around $930. So I know a lot of people are going to hear that and they're going to say, ew, gross. I'm not even going to look at it. I think it's going to change. I couldn't coax a committed answer from Philip to talk about the pricing change, but I would speculate that price is going to go down and there will probably be some different pricing metrics by the time they go GA, which I also couldn't get that date from him either.
that's funny. Yeah, I didn't even know they had that. So that's really cool. I'll have to check out the stream. I've admittedly not had a chance to watch it yet. So
It was
awesome.
cool. We were able to get it working. Andres and I built two Lambda functions, one that ingests data and puts it into the index, and another one that searches across that index. And we didn't have to build a VPC. We didn't have to do anything with networking. We just stored the endpoint URL and the API key inside a secrets manager, and we're able to access it that way. So super nice, big improvement as far as infrastructure goes from using OpenSearch. I have battle wounds from that one from a previous life. So I'm excited about the idea of a serverless version of this.
Yeah, that is highly exciting. Interested to see how that all works out. And I may end up even using it. So who knows? Awesome. Let's get into closing it up. So let's chat about some upcoming live streams this week. First one that we have, this one may already have happened. This is on August 27th. It's about moving a scaled workload to ECS Fargate. Moving a scaled workload to AWS ECS Fargate Spot for less than a coffee. So that looks super interesting to me. It's like it's Greg Olmsted and Justin Borland. So
Yeah, I've been
watch the replay.
Yes, I think that's going to be a really cool one. You and I are recording this on Monday, and that one happens Tuesday morning at, I believe it's 10 a.m. Eastern. So based on whatever time this releases, it could have already happened. But I think that's going to be an incredibly pragmatic session. I've been talking with Greg a lot about this session, and I just love talks like this that are about things that people are doing or have done, because everybody's going to end up moving workloads that are on-prem to Fargate. I mean, that's the easy step one. Easy step one. So this is the lessons learned from that. Love it. And then on Thursday, we have two sessions. I think they're actually back to back. Maybe not back to back, but they're real close together. The first one is with Erin McHale Staples. She and I are going to be doing a live coding session with Launch Darkly. We're going to be building an API, I think, that uses feature flags from Launch Darkly. We're going to be using Cloudflare to do that back and forth in the service. So I'm really excited about that. I actually have not actually used Cloudflare before, so I am curious to see how that's going to be. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And I like Launch Darkly in general. When I think of feature flags, I think of that.
There we go. We use it at the day job, and yeah, I really enjoy it myself. So yeah, excited for that one. And then our third one is a simpler serverless local development experience with AppWrite by Aditya Oberoi. Sorry if I mispronounced the name. But yeah, who doesn't want a simpler serverless local development experience? So I'm really intrigued by this one.
Yeah, and that's using AppWrite, which I again haven't used myself. There's so many things that I want to use that I just don't have the time to do. But I'm pretty sure that one's just like AWS. I think that's a competitor to Amazon, and
Oh,
their
okay.
whole thing is it's the easiest here, and I'm really interested to see if that holds up. Now, a lot of times we go in like, Danielle, you and I are both serverless heroes. There's a lot that we take for granted with what we already know. We could say, oh yeah, it's super simple to go build an API that runs Lambda and DynamoDB. Super simple. I could do it in 2 minutes. But buddy that hasn't done that before, it might take 2 days to figure out all the pieces and figure out those permissions and all that. So I'm going to go into that session with open arms and embrace developer experience wholeheartedly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, really stoked for that one. So awesome. So let's close it up here. Thanks for listening. We are really, really happy to have you all in our community. If you're not already on our Discord, definitely join us. If you go to believeinserverless.com, there should be an invite there. We always like to make jokes about how sometimes they're expired. So if that's the case, you can feel free to DM any of the Believe in Serverless Discord champions, anyone who's already in the Discord. I'm sure someone can get you in. And once you join us, make sure you introduce yourself in the interest channel. Tell us where you're at, what you're working on, and I'm sure you'll find some common connections. And definitely feel free to submit questions in the Discord for future episodes. We love learning together. The great thing about tech and serverless is there's always new stuff out there. So we're all learning together.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you can find podcasts. We'll also have a video version on YouTube. So definitely tune in there, and we'll have another one next week. But thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful week.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.